Ever heard the story of David and Goliath? Well, what if I told you a real-life version of this played out in a military exercise? Not with stones and slings, but with strategy, grit, and a group of soldiers who proved that size isn't everything. This is the incredible story of how a Filipino Scout Ranger team went up against South Korea's elite Special Forces and did the unthinkable. Our story begins in 2017 at the annual military drills between the Philippines and South Korea. These exercises are all about sharing knowledge, building camaraderie, and of course, a bit of friendly competition. Representing South Korea was their 707th Special Mission Battalion, also known as the White Tigers. These guys are the best of the best, the cream of the crop in the South Korean military. They're famous for their intense training, cutting-edge gear, and formidable physical presence. Think of them as the super soldiers you see in movies, big, strong, and equipped with the latest technology. On the other side, representing the Philippines, were the Scout Rangers. Now, Filipino soldiers are legendary for their toughness and jungle warfare skills. But physically, they often appear leaner, more wiry, compared to their Western or even some of their Asian counterparts. They might not have had the same imposing physique as the White Tigers, but what they did have was decades of real-world combat experience forged in the jungles and mountains of their homeland. The stage was set for a classic showdown, a mock battle exercise. The objective was simple, at least on paper. The South Korean team had to defend a fortified position, a simulated enemy camp. The Filipino Scout Rangers' mission: infiltrate and capture that camp. It was a textbook offense versus defense scenario. From the get-go, the odds seemed stacked against the Filipinos. The South Korean position was a fortress. They had superior numbers, advanced surveillance equipment, and a well-planned defensive perimeter. Onlookers, and even some participants, probably expected the White Tigers to make short work of the attackers. They were bigger, stronger, and had home field advantage in a sense, with a perfectly prepared defensive setup. But the Scout Rangers had a different plan. They weren't going to play by the enemy's rules. A frontal assault would be suicide. They knew their strength wasn't in overwhelming force, but in cunning, stealth, and an intimate understanding of terrain and tactics. Their leader, a seasoned officer, gathered his small team. Instead of a rousing speech about glory, he focused on strategy. He reminded them of their training. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. This wasn't about a mad dash. It was about patience and precision. The exercise began. For hours, it seemed like nothing was happening. The South Korean defenders scanned their perimeter, confident in their technological superiority. They had thermal imagers, night vision, and motion sensors. They were a wall of steel and electronics. But the jungle has a way of hiding things. The Filipino team didn't move as a single unit. They split into smaller groups, almost vanishing into the foliage. They moved with a patience that was almost inhuman. They weren't just walking. They were becoming part of the landscape. They crawled on their bellies through mud and thick underbrush, moving mere inches at a time. They used natural cover, the shadows of trees, the sound of the wind, to mask their presence. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig, could give them away. So they moved with the silence of ghosts. This is where the Scout Rangers' legendary discipline kicked in. Imagine lying motionless for hours, with insects crawling on you, in uncomfortable, damp conditions. Knowing that one mistake could mean failure. That's the mental fortitude that sets them apart. They weren't just fighting the enemy. They were fighting their own fatigue, their own impatience. One by one, the small Filipino teams began to bypass the South Korean outer defenses. They didn't trip any sensors or make any sound. They exploited the blind spots, the tiny gaps in the seemingly perfect defensive net that only a highly trained eye could spot. The South Korean team, relying heavily on their technology, were looking for a conventional attack. They were expecting noise, movement, a charge. They were not prepared for an enemy that moved like mist. The first sign of trouble for the defenders came not with a bang, but a whisper. One of their sentries on the perimeter just disappeared. One moment, he was there. The next, he was gone, silently neutralized by a scout ranger who had crept up behind him. No alarm was raised. The rangers used hand signals to communicate, a silent language of war. Another sentry gone, and another. The Filipino team was dismantling the defense from the outside in, like a virus, silently corrupting a computer system. By the time the South Korean command realized something was terribly wrong, it was too late. The scout rangers were already inside the perimeter. They had bypassed the main defenses and were now in the heart of the camp. The element of surprise was total and absolute. Suddenly, chaos erupted. But it wasn't the chaos of a wild firefight. It was controlled, precise. The rangers struck simultaneously from multiple directions. Flares went off, but not from the defenders. The rangers used them to disorient and create confusion. Before the White Tigers could even mount a coordinated response, their command post was overrun. Their commanders were captured, and their communication lines were cut. The formidable fortress had been taken from within, without a single shot being fired in a major frontal assault. The exercise was over. The umpires and observers were stunned. The Filipino Scout Rangers, the smaller, less equipped team, had achieved a decisive victory. They hadn't just won. They had done it with breathtaking efficiency and skill. When the two teams met, for the after-action review, the atmosphere was one of mutual respect. The South Koreans, though surprised by the outcome, were eager to learn how the Filipinos had done it. They had expected a test of strength, but were given a masterclass in strategy. They learned that the most advanced gear is useless if you do account for the human element, for cunning, patience, and the ability to think outside the box. The Filipino team, humble in their victory, shared their tactics. They explained their philosophy of using the terrain as their greatest weapon and their discipline as their strongest shield. It wasn't about being stronger. It was about being smarter. It wasn't about the size of the soldier in the fight, but the size of the fight in the soldier. This story quickly became a source of immense pride within the armed forces of the Philippines and for Filipinos worldwide. It's a powerful reminder that true strength doesn't always come from bulging muscles or expensive gadgets. It comes from the mind. It comes from discipline forged through years of hardship. It comes from the unwavering spirit of a warrior who knows that with the right strategy, any giant can be toppled. The legend of the Filipino Scout Rangers against the South Korean White Tigers is just a military tale. It's a universal lesson. Whether you're in business, sports, or just facing a personal challenge that seems insurmountable, remember this story. Don't be intimidated by the Goliaths. Find your unique strength, sharpen your mind, be patient, be disciplined, and you might just find a way to win. It proves that the underdog spirit, backed by intelligence and unwavering resolve, is one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this incredible story of skill and strategy, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this amazing feat. Until next time, stay sharp and stay inspired.